I have previously made a nasa.gov landing page clone, and that video got 100 views, which is my most viewed video. So hey, I thought, why not make another landing page clone? So I made the landing page of NASA. So as you can see, this is the official NASA website, and this is what we are going to build today. So we're going to use CSS Grid to lay out most of the stuff, then we're going to use CSS Flexbox a little bit here and there. We're also going to make the web page fully responsive. Now if you're ready to get started, grab a cup of coffee, because now we are getting down with code. Okay, so to start off, I have an empty folder open in VS Code, and I have made a Git repository containing some basic starter plate code. So to start off, you can just use git clone to get the code, and you will get all of my code here. I have added font awesome, the Google font that NASA uses, and the favicon, and I have also added some default styling for the fonts and margins for the images, and I have added in all the colors that is needed, and most importantly, I have all the images. We have NASA's website here, and we are going to start off by building the mobile version for this. So I'm going to set it to iPhone X to have that as a reference, and this is NASA's website, and it ain't, to be honest, it ain't really perfect. It's got some problems, so we're also going to try to make it just a bit better by making it a bit more responsive, because it really breaks at small sizes. Yeah, let's start off with the mobile version. Okay, so I'm going to start off by setting up the body and everything to make it black. So I'm going to go into my body, and I'm going to set the background color to 00, which is just pure black. I'm going to set the max width to 1400 pixels, which is the max width that we then want later on when the website is supposed to scale fully. And I'm going to set the main width to 92.5 viewport width. And then I'm going to set the minimum height to 100 VH. Now let's open up this file and see what it looks like. Okay, and we have just a blank page and the NASA title up here in the tab. Okay, so I am now going to proceed to setting up the header. So I'm going to start by just adding a header tag in my HTML, and inside of here I'm going to add an image, and it's going to have a source of image slash nasa-logo.svg. It's important that it is the SVG, because it has no background, it has no transparent background, and it can scale without losing any quality. I'm not going to add an alt because this is just a kind of quick prototyping up a website and it's not going to actually be deployed. Okay, and now I'm going to add in my H2 header, and this is going to be NASA TV. So we need a search icon, a share icon, and a bars icon, and we're going to use font awesome for this. So we're going to just add in I tag to find the classes that you need. I have this plugin to VS Code where you can just search up what you want, and it will just give you the code that you need and also an image of the icon that the code responds to. So I can just copy paste this in. I'm going to copy this down, and I want a share icon. Now I couldn't find that specific share icon, but I'm going to use this one instead. I think that one will work too. And we need a bar, kind of a hamburger menu. So I'm just going to search for menu, and we will get here the bars. Okay, and now if we take a look, we see that we can't see anything, and the reason we're not seeing anything is because these are black. So we need to change the font color to white. So I'm going into my header, and I'm going to change the color to white, and now we should see that we can see our icons here. Now we want to lay them out horizontally, and we could use Flexbox for this, and it's probably easier, but since we are later on going to use CSS Grid to lay out everything, we are going to lay this out using CSS Grid. So to style our header, I am going to start off by setting up the width, which is going to be 100% of the body container. I'm then going to add a background image, which is going to be the image slash stars.jpg, and we will get these stars that NASA has on their website. Also, we want to align everything to the center, so we want to make sure that everything is completely centered horizontally, and therefore I'm going to add a Flexbox container to my body to make everything very easily to display. And I know I said that the main purpose is to practice grid, but we're also going to use Flexbox in some cases to kind of see how they can combine and work together. So now I'm going to align the items to center, and we should see that everything should be aligning properly to the center. And we also need to add some margin 0 auto just to make sure that the body also itself is centered, since the body is not taking up 100% of the width. Okay, and now we got everything very nicely set up here. So now I'm going to fix the menu. So I'm going to change the header to a display of grid. And not much has changed yet, so we need to set up our columns. And I'm going to have a 100 pixel column right here for the logo. Then a 50 pixel column just to add some space. And then the rest is going to be filled up with this navigation right here. So we're going to set up grid template columns to be 100 pixels, 50 pixels, and auto, which is going to fill up the rest of it. And if we look now, things are very unorganized. And it is because it's trying to fit everything in as small spaces as possible. So it sees, for example, that this right here also fits right in under the logo. So we need to place our items in the proper column. So I'm going to start by grouping together all of this navigation into one div to make it much easier to navigate. So I'm just going to add a div with a class of mobile nav and then move the code up here. And then I'm going to access mobile nav, and I'm going to set the grid column to be 3 to 4. And that means that it's going to start from the third line, which is going to be 1, 2, 3 to the fourth right here. So it's going to fill up the auto column. And if we look now, we can see that it very nicely fills up this column. However, we want to line them up horizontally and not vertically stacking. So we are going to set them to a display of flex. As I said, combining Flexbox and CSS Grid. So if we set it to a display of flex, we can see that they change to now lining up horizontally, but we want them to stack properly. So we're going to set align items to center and justify content to space evenly. And if we look now, things are looking much nicer. However, the logo is also a bit too big. So I'm going to access this logo and change the size. So I am going to access the logo by using an attribute selector. So I'm just going to do header and then image with an attribute of source equal to this. Then I'm going to set the width to 80 pixels. And now everything looks a bit better. Now it's very tight right to the top here. So I want to add some padding. So I'm just going to very quickly add some padding right here of 0.5 ems and 0 on the horizontal, and we should see much more space here. Now I also want to add this kind of like very light gray line here. So I'm going to do a border bottom of 1 pixel solid light gray. And we should see this very exact line. And then also we have to make sure that the position is fixed so that when we scroll down, the header will stay at its place. Now it's kind of moving up a bit weirdly. I don't know why. Let's see. Yeah, as you can see, the header is always staying at its exact same space. So we don't want it to scroll. So I'm going to set the position to fixed. I'm also going to set the Z index to 1. Just to make sure that it always lays on top of other items. Okay, so now we got the header set up, and now we want to add in these cards. And to display this, I'm going to use a main tag, Then I'm going to use divs with a class of card, and I'm going to display everything using CSS Grid to make sure that the columns responsively adapt as the viewport width gets larger. However, let's just for now concern ourselves with making the markup. So we go to the HTML, and I'm going to add a main tag, and then inside of here I'm going to add a div with a class of card, and I'm also going to set the background image of this card, and I'm going to set this to background image URL, and then it's going to be image/space.jpg right here. And there we have our background image. And if you wonder how I've named these images, I've just named these images to be the first word of the text that is associated with them. So this image right here is just called 2021, and then this image right here is just called the, for example. Okay, now we move on to our cards. So I'm going to start by adding an h3, and I'm going to give it a class of image info, and this is going to be kind of the blue text right here, this text field. And then I'm going to add another one, which is going to be an h2 with a class of image text. And then I'm going to start putting in stuff right here. So for this first one, it's just going to be space station operations extended through 2030, and this h3 tag is going to just be empty. And now if we take a look, we can see that absolutely nothing appears. So what we have to do is that we have to add an height to our div. So I'm going to access my card class, and I'm going to give this a height of 300 pixels. And as we can see, our image is now showing up. And we also want to make sure that the text and everything else is properly displaying. I am then going to fix my image right here. So I'm going to set background repeat to no repeat to make sure that it does not repeat. I'm going to set background position to center, make sure that the image is always centered. Then I'm going to set background size to cover, so that it always covers the exact field that I want it to fill. Okay, and now I want to make sure that I can see the text. So I'm going to start by setting my card element to a display of flex, a flex direction of column, and then justify content of flex end to position it right at the bottom, and we should see our text showing up right here in the bottom left corner. Now I'm going to start by styling this text, so I'm going to select image text, I call my class, and I'm going to set the color to be, it's going to be a black color, and the background color is instead going to be a very whitish color. It's going to be to complete white and then 0.8 opacity. And if we look now, we can see the text right here, but we also want to add some padding and fix the font size. So I'm going to start off by adding some padding, and I'm going to add 0.25em and 0.5em, and now it lines up a bit more nicely. I'm also going to change the font weight to be 600 and the font size to be 1.2 rem, and then finally the line height to be 1.25 em. Now we should see that the text looks very nicely identical to the original one. And now I'm going to set up my main tag to make sure that all the cards display properly. So I'm going to select main and add a display of grid. Then I'm going to set justify content to center. I'm going to set width to a maximum of 100%. And I'm going to set margin top to 6M to make sure that we get some space to the header. It looks very nice. So now I'm going to move on to making the next card, which is going to be this one, 2021 disasters. So I'm just going to select all of this and copy this down. And I'm going to change the background image to be 2021.png. And then I'm going to switch the text. And now we also want to add this blue text file right here with a text of Earth. And if we look now, we can see that there is kind of a blackish color here. So it is right here, but we need to display it properly. So I'm going to select dash image info. I'm going to set the color to be white. I'm going to set the background color to be this color that I previously wrote down. And if we take a look now, we can see that it appears right here, but it is taking up the entire space, and it's because it has an aligned self of stretch, so it stretches its entire width. But we just want it to be right at the start, so I'm going to set align self to flex start. And now as we see, it very neatly covers itself right up here in the corner. I am going to add some padding. So I'm going to do 0.25M and 0.75M to the sides. And I'm going to also slightly increase the font size to be 1.05 rem. I'm going to set the font weight to be 600. And now, as we can see, these cards look very nice. They line up pretty much perfectly. But we need some space right here between the cards. So I'm going to go into my card class and add a margin bottom of 1M. And now, pretty much an exact copy. Now I'm just going to add in all of these other cards. And you can do, and I'm going to do that just by copying these down a lot of times. And then I can change the text. So this next one is all of this text right here. So I'm just going to type it in. I'm going to add the image. And now, as we can see, we have added in the card here, and it looks great because we have set all of the styling. So now I'm going to add all of these other cards just by copying this down, changing the text and changing the image. And you can do this, and they are also updating the site constantly, so you might have different images, different text, so you can add it in yourself. So add in all of the text and all of the images that are right now on nasa.gov, download the images and just plug them right into here. And now I am now going to fill in all of the rest of the images and text. Okay, so now I have added in all of the other cards, and as we can see, they are all displaying beautifully. And now if we scroll down, we need to fix this footer. Okay, so to fix the footer, I am going to change my markup. So I'm just going to very quickly first close this and close this, so we can see things easier. And then I'm going to add my footer. And inside of my footer, I'm going to start off by adding an h3 tag called more stories. And then I'm going to have the NASA logo. So I'm going to do image/NASA-logo.svg. And then we want some text. And then right here, we want to add a break so that it goes to a new line. Cool. And once we've typed everything in, I'm going to add all of these links. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to add a hashtag to all of these, just so they lead to an empty link. Then I'm going to add in the text. And you could also like do unordered list and a list items and everything around that. But I'm just going to do simple anchor tags to make things simpler. Okay, and now I got everything in, so let's just quickly take a look, and things look horrible. So we need to fix this. So I'm going to start by fixing this h3 tag right here, and I'm going to select it just by doing footer and then directional h3. So we're going to do text align center. Color is going to be white, and background color is going to be this dark bluish color I saved earlier. And also I noticed that maybe the font size is a bit too small for you to see, so I'm just going to increase it just by a little bit. So for those, especially if you're on mobile, then you can see things a bit easier, or you're on a small screen. Okay, so now what we've got to do is that we gotta set the font size. Now I'm going to set the font size and font weight. So I'm going to do font size of 0.9 rem, and then font weight of 600. I am also going to add some padding on the top and the bottom, just like that, and it looks much nicer, although the font size is probably a bit too small. And I think that 1 rem actually is enough, maybe like 1.05. Okay, let's go with 1.05. And now I'm going to go into my footer, and I'm going to set it to a display of flex, and then flex direction column. Align items is going to be flex start, and also have to add a semicolon right here. Okay, that looks like something. We want this one also to be the stretch the entire width, so I'm just going to set this to stretch, and we should see that it very nicely fits right here into. And also want to set the width to 100% to make sure that it spans the entire container. Now we're going to fix the logo and everything else here. So I'm going to start by adding in the logo. So we just have one image here, so I'm just very quickly just going to select the image inside of the footer, and I'm going to set the width to 60 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. That's way too small, so I might just do 8 pixels, and that looks a lot better. I'm also going to add some margin to the top. Let's do 2M. That's a bit too much. Let's just do 1M. Okay, and that looks better. Now I'm going to fix this text. So I'm going to do footer p tag, and you might do direct child also. This ain't exactly super robust because you might add in some other stuff later, and then the code will break. So you might want to add IDs and classes to make things a bit more specific. However, as I said, this is a rather simple page, so rather than overcomplicating things, I'm just going to make things simple to make the page as fast as possible. So I'm going to set the color to white, and now the color should show up here. And also we need to add some styling to this text. So I'm going to set the font weight to be 600. I'm going to set the line height to be 1.1em. And now it looks a lot better, although it still looks a bit too big. So I'm going to set the font size to be 0.9 rem. If I can fix my semicolon. And that looks pretty much perfect. So now I'm just going to add in all of these. So I'm going to do my footer A. I'm going to set the color to be this blue color right here. I'm going to make sure that the font weight is 600 also, semi-bold. And we don't want any underline under the text. And now it looks a bit better, but the font size is a bit too big, so we're going to fix that. I think that's a bit maybe too big. Let's see. Okay, that looks good. And now we also want to add some gaps. So I'm just going to go into my footer and I'm just going to do gap of 0.5 m between all of the items. And now we also need some gaps. So I'm just going to go here to my p tag and do border margin bottom of 1 m. And that looks really good. Also, I noticed that the footer right here spans the entire viewport width. So I quickly changed the footer width to from 100% to 100 viewport widths. But then we also need to add some padding right here. So we add some padding. So we'll just do 0 and then 0.5 m. But now we see that the button doesn't stretch the entire width. So we can just add some negative margin. Minus 0.5 m. And now we see that the button stretches the entire width, but the rest of all of the elements are very nicely placed. And then finally, I am just going to add some margin bottom to my footer of around 3 m. Just to get some nice space right down here. It actually looks to be a bit more on the official website. So that looks pretty much perfect. Also, I did some quick fixes to the header. So I changed the width to be 100 viewport widths, so that would span the entire viewport. Then added some more padding, just so that it wouldn't go all out to the entire edges. So it had some space here. Also changed this from space evenly to flex end, so it wouldn't float away. And then I added some gap between all the items of 0.5 m. So they wouldn't be all meshed together. And now this looks a lot nicer. And as you can see, now we have set up the entire web page for the mobile version, but now we need to fix it so it also displays nicely on bigger screens. Okay, now if you look, you can see that at around 700 pixels, the layout changes from 1 column to 2 columns. So let's do that. I'm going to jump into my style sheet and right at the bottom, I'm going to add a media query. And I'm going to set it from a minimum width of 700 pixels. And then right here, I'm going to select my main. And I'm going to set the grid template columns to be 1 fraction and 1 fraction. So it's going to divide it up into 2 parts. And then I want to make sure that this first image right here spans 2 columns. So I'm going to select my very first image right here. And I'm just going to use an attribute selector with style, so I don't have to add any more IDs or anything. So I'm going to do .card with an attribute of this image. And I'm going to set grid column to be 1 to -1. Meaning from the first column to the last column. And if we take a look now, right at around 700 pixels, things will change. You will see this one will take up 2 columns and everything else will take up 1 column each on the side. However, now we also need to add some gap right here between. So the easiest way to do this is just by adding a bit of gap between here. And as we can see, it looks pretty nicely. However, now there are some big spaces right here between the different rows. So I'm just going to do card row and then margin 0. And now we'll see that everything is just a gap of 1 m. And I think that looks very nicely. And then the next change to the column layout is at around 1050 pixels, when it instead changes to 4 columns and 4 rows. So let's do that also. So I'm going to create another media query. And then I'll go into my main and I'll set up the grid template rows and columns in one now. So if I can spell everything correctly, firstly we have to set up the rows. So we have 4 rows and I'm just going to do 4 rows, each 1 fraction each, and then I'm going to do the exact same for the columns. So we have 4 rows, 4 columns, and each row and each column have the exact same width. And as you can see now, when we pass over 1050 pixels, it changes to 4 columns, but we want to change it to this layout. So I'm going to start by selecting this card. Now I'm going to change it now to span from the first to the third row. So it's going to be grid row is going to be from 1 to 3rd. And then grid column is going to be from 1 to 3 also. And if we take a look, then we will see that it spans right over here. If we change the grid column, and now as we can see, it very nicely fits right into here. And now we also want to add this image right here. So I'm going to quickly go into my HTML and select it using the style attribute. Then I'm going to do .card, paste this in. And now I want this one to span from the 2nd to the 3rd row. So it's just going to be grid row 2 to 3. And then from the 3rd to the 5th column. So I'm going to do grid column 2 to the, no, sorry, 3 to the 5th. Exactly. And if we take a look now, then we'll see that it also displays very nicely here. And then lastly, we want to set this image. So I'm going to select it. And this one should span from 1 to 3, from 3 to the 4th row. So it will be 3 to the 4th. And then grid column will be from 2 to the 4th. And now if we take a look, everything displays very nicely, all the images. Also, we can see that our footer right here spans the entire width, which we don't no longer want. So I'm going to set the max width to be 1400 pixels, so it doesn't scale anymore. And also, just to add some space here, I'm going to do margin top of 1em. And I'm going to change it to 2em because I think it needs a bit more. And now it looks pretty much identical. Now the last things we need to change is the menu, because as you can see, it changes when it goes to the bigger sizes. So I am going to start off by adding in this little search box right here. Okay, so to make this search box, I'm going to add a form to my HTML. So I'm going to jump right into here, to my header. And then right after my H2 header right here, I'm going to add a form. I'm going to have an input with type of text. I'm going to call this search and give it an ID of search and a placeholder of search. I'm then going to have a button, which is going to have a type of submit. And it is going to have a class of search, which just watch was this font awesome code right here. And if we take a look now, we can see that we have a search box here, but we don't want it to appear about until 550 pixels of width. So I am going to go right here into my CSS, and I'm going to set my form of a display of none. So now it will be completely gone. But then I'm going to add in a media query. Now I'm going to select my form and I'm going to give it a display of inline. And as you can see, right as we pass 550 pixels, it will be visible. And then I need to select my button and my text to style it to make everything look nice. So I'm going to start by selecting the text. I'm going to set some padding to 0.75em and 0.5em. I'm going to set the background color to be a very light gray and remove the border. And now it looks a lot nicer, just like it does in the original page. And then I am going to have to set this icon to be placed within this search text field. So I'm going to select the button with the type of submit. I'm going to set the position to absolute. But then we also need to set the position of the form to be relative so that it is placed right there. I'm then going to set the right to be 10 pixels, the top to be 50%, and then I have to do transform, translate, minus 50% of its own height, so that it properly gets aligned in the middle. And I'm going to set the color to white to make the icon white. And now if you take a look, it looks pretty nice, but we also need to remove the background color. So I'm just going to change it to be the same background color as the other background. And we need to set the border to nothing so that it's gone. And now it looks pretty nice, but we also need to change the font size. So I'm going to set it to 1.1 rem. And as you can see, now we have our very nice search box here, but we also need to remove that other search, this icon right here. So I'm just going to very quickly give it an ID of search icon so that we can select it here. And here I'm going to add a display of none. So as you can see, it changes right at 550 pixels to the search box. Very nice. Okay, and now we gotta fix so that the rest of the menu is added in. So I am going to start by adding the markup in the HTML. So the way I'm going to structure this is into two menus, two divs, one called menu 1 and another called menu 2. So let's add that. And inside of these menus, I'm going to just have H2s and then H3 in menu 2. And I'm going to add all of the content in here. Okay, so I added my menu 1. I'm now going to add my menu 2. And here I'm instead going to have H3s. Okay, and once you've added it in, it's time to do some styling, because as we can see, things are currently looking awful. So I'm going to start by jumping into my CSS, and I'm going to set also menu 1 and menu 1 and menu 2 to be a display of none, so that they won't appear. But then right around 1250 pixels, I'm going to add them right back in. So I'm going to do another media query. And inside of my media query, I'm going to select my menu 1 and my menu 2. And I'm going to set the display to flex. So that right as we pass through, they should show up again. But now we need to align stuff so that it does not look absolutely horrible. So I'm going to go into my header tag. And I'm going to change the layout. So I want 4 columns, one right here for the logo, one right here for empty space, one right here which is going to be auto and fill in the rest of the space, and one right here at 250 pixels to fill in the search box. Okay, so I'm going to do grid template columns, and I'm going to do 100 pixels, 50 pixels, auto, and 250 pixels. I'm going to do grid template rows, and I'm going to do 50 pixels and 50 pixels. So that we have that layout, but now we need to align stuff. And I'm going to use a trick, which is grid template areas, which very easily helps to align stuff. And if you haven't seen this before, I really recommend looking into it. However, I'm just going to do logo, empty, menu 1, and then search. I'm going to remove the semicolon, and then logo, menu 2, and then menu 2. And thus we can very easily prototype where we want things to be. Then we can just do menu 1 and set the grid area to be menu 1. Then we can do the same thing for menu 2. So menu 2 will have a grid area of menu 2. And then the form, or the mobile nav as a whole, will have a grid area of search. And then the image, which was the one with source equal to stars, will have a grid area of logo. Okay, and as we can see, things are kind of starting to line up, but we need to change some things. I'm going to start by removing the bars and the nasa.gov from the form. So I'm going to select the... So instead of my mobile nav, I'm going to do mobile nav and direct child h2. I'm going to set the display to none. And also I'm going to add an ID of menu to my bars icon. And I'm also going to do menu right here. Now you should see that they are both gone. Now we want to make sure that everything is styling properly so that it looks nice. Okay, so now I'm going to style these. So I'm going to go into my grid to my menu one. And I'm going to set some gap between all of my items. I'm going to set it to 1em. I'm going to set justify content to space evenly. I'm going to set align items to center and font size to 0.85 rem. Now this menu looks a bit nicer, but I want to add these vertical lines in between. So you could do border right, but I think it's easier that you add some horizontal line elements here in between. And then I can style them. Then using Flexbox, I can perfectly align them in the center between each element. So I'm just going to copy this down. Just like that. Then I'm going to set up my HR. So I'm going to do dot menu one HR, and I'm going to do border dot right is going to be 1 pixel solid hashtag free. I'm also going to set align self to stretch. And now we have these lines added right here very nicely. And also I'm going to set border to 0 because we don't want no border left, no border top, no border bottom, just border right. And then I'm going to increase the width a bit. And probably even make it a bit lighter. And that looks much better. Now I'm going to fix this text, this menu 2 text right here. So I am going to do a gap of 1em, just the same. I'm going to do justify content of flex start. I'm going to do align items of center, and then background color is going to be 555. Padding is going to be 0.5em and 1em. And also this is going to be justify self, my mistake. And then font size is going to be 0.8 rem. Okay. And then also we want to add these vertical lines, so we're going to do the same thing right here. Cool. And then I'm instead going to select dot menu 2 HR. I'm going to do more or less the same thing, but with some minor adjustments. Okay, let's look at that. And it's way too light, so I'm going to try this color right here. And wow, okay, we have to change it to 1 pixel. And I think it's pretty good, but it's still a bit too light. I'm gonna try just 999. Okay, that looks much better. Okay, and then to make things align a bit more nicely, I'm going to set justify self on menu 1 to end. And I'm going to do margin bottom of 1em. Now it will align a bit more to the top, just as we want. Then I'm going to fix this menu right here. So I'm going to select justify self to center. I'm going to switch up the margin to be 1em. And I'm going to increase the gap to 1.5em and also slightly decrease the font size. And it seems to look a bit better. I'm also going to add some margin top of 1em. And now it looks a bit more like it is supposed to. And lastly, I also have to fix this image right here. Okay, and I also noticed that I had accidentally chosen the wrong image, so just make sure that you have your selector right here. And then I want to increase the size, so I'm going to try 200 pixels, but as you can see nothing changes. And that is because our column is set to 100 pixels, so let's try to set that to 200, and that looks way too big, so let's do 125. And that looks a bit too big. Let's try 115. 115 looks about right. So I'm going to go with that. Now the last thing we need to fix is the footer. As you can see, it has changed layout. So it changes layout at about, as we can see, around 1100 pixels. So I'm just going to add it right here into 1250 pixel query just because it is easier. So I'm going to go into my footer. And then I'm going to change flex direction to row. And now it has changed. However, we have some new problems here. Okay, so to fix that, we have to move up our h3 outside of our footer so that it is a direct child of body, and this is part of my mistake, I missed that. Then we'll instead change it to be a direct child of the body, and we will remove this margin, and we will remove the align self of stretch. And if we take a look now, we can see that it is right here. So I'm going to set the width to be 100 viewport widths, but we want the max width to be 1400 pixels. And we should see that it very nicely lines up right here. Then we want to add a margin top of 1em or 2em. And now it looks very nicely exactly like it is supposed to. And now we can set up our footer. So in our media query, I'm going to set justify content to be center. And I'm going to go into my anchor tags, and I'm going to set align self to be flex end. And let's take a look at how that looks like. Okay, so we need to add some gap. Okay, that looks a bit better. And I'm going to change justify content to instead be flex start, so that it lines up more to the left. And I'm also going to increase the gap to be 1.5em. And it looks pretty nice, but we gotta fix, there's a bit too much gap here. So instead I'm going to do, I'm instead just going to do 0.5em, and then I'm going to go into my anchor tags, and I'm going to do margin right of 1.5em. I'm going to do 2em, I think. Okay, cool. And then also, because we don't want it to be on the last anchor tag, I'm going to do footer and then last child and set that margin to 0. Okay. So I think we've got the entire page set up. Let's just take a look at it to make sure that everything's looking nice. So I'm going to set the width to be 2000. Maybe that's just a bit too much. Let's just do 1500, and then, yeah, let's do 4000. And then now we have our entire page here. And as you can see, it will responsively resize, change the menu, change to 2 columns, change to 1 column, looking very nicely. And then it will scale, 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 but then it seems like we got some problems here at very, very small screen sizes. Let's just take a quick look at that. And it seems like we need to add a bit of a media query just to make it look acceptable and viewable at really, really small screen sizes also. So to fix compatibility issues at small screens, I'm going to do max width of 300 pixels. I'm going to go into my header and I'm going to change the layout to be let's see, 3 fractions, 1 fractions, and 5 fractions, so that will scale down as small as can be. Then I'm going to set body, header, main, and footer to have a minimum width of 250 pixels. And if I can actually type an X, then things scale a lot nicer on small screens too, if everything reloads also. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and at small screens it also looks nice. Pretty much, just a small issue there, but I think it's very good. Works on small screens, works on big screens. We have built NASA's landing page. If you made it to the end of this video, then I just want to say that you are an absolute legend. As of currently, I have 12 subscribers. So if you would like to see more awesome content, then please subscribe. It would really make my day. See ya.